Hannah Voss stood alone at the Dry Fork General Store and loaded her wagon by hand. Bundles of bare cottonwood whips. Dormant sticks, gray and thin as a broom straw. She had cut 4,000 of them herself. On the porch above her, the men laughed. She did not answer them. She counted the last bundle, set it in the bed, and drove out onto the flat. 2 counties over, a cattleman named Burdette Vane stood before 40 men at the Bloomington land office and made himself loud on purpose. "Give her 3 winters," he said. "I'll run beef on that quarter by spring. A woman can't prove up sticks." And there was a second wound under that one. Her husband had worked their homestead 8 years. Only his name was on the paper. Never hers. Inside, the register glanced down at the statute. He read 2 words aloud. Any person. Hannah opened a small cloth book and wrote down the date. I won't tell you yet what that book was for. If you ever did the work for years and watched the credit land on someone else's ledger, this story is for you. Before we go on, subscribe and comment what state or county you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. Now, let me take you back to the counting room and tell it slow. The land office at Bloomington smelled of ink and cold iron. Hannah had ridden in from Webster County on a borrowed team, her good dress folded so it would not crease. She was near 40. She had come from far off, years ago, with Carl, and they had broken sod together on a quarter near Dry Fork. 8 springs she had put her back into that ground. Carl was under it now. She stood at the counter. The man behind it was Ansel Pryor, the register. A careful man. He wore sleeve guards, and he did not smile easily. "You want to make an entry," he said. "I do. Your husband holds a homestead near Dry Fork." "He did. He's passed. His name is on it. Not mine." Pryor looked at her a moment. He did not offer pity. That she was grateful for. "There's another way onto land, if you've the nerve for it," he said. The Timber Culture Act. 73. He pulled a printed sheet toward him. You enter a quarter section. 160 acres. You plant 40 acres of trees. You keep them alive 8 years. At the end, the United States deeds you the whole quarter. $14 in fees. No purchase price. "Trees," she said. "Trees." He turned the sheet so she could read it, though she knew he did not think she would. His finger touched the line. "It says here, any person may enter 1/4 section under this act." Any person. Head of a family, or single, man or woman, 21 years or over, he shrugged. The smallest motion. "I read that to mean it covers a widow the same as it covers Vane out there. The words don't stop at the door for anybody." "Then, I'll enter," Hannah said. Pryor took out the book and dipped his pen. $14. She set her purse on the counter and counted it out, coin by coin. $1. 2. She had brought it in silver because she wanted to feel every piece leave her hand. Pryor watched her stack them, and he did not rush her. When it was done, he swept the coins into the drawer and wrote her name onto the register. Hannah Voss. Her own name. Not Carl's. Hers. Outside, on the way to the wagon, she stopped at a dry goods shelf and bought one more thing. A small book, bound in gray cloth. The clerk asked her what it was for, and she told him the truth, or near it. To keep the rows straight, she said. He nodded and thought no more of it. A housekeeping habit. A woman and her little book. She had no idea yet that the little book would decide everything. There was no money for nursery stock. There was no money for much of anything. So Hannah did what the poor have always done on the plains. She went down to the creek in the last cold week before the thaw, and she cut. Cottonwood, peach-leaf willow. Long dormant whips off the old trees, the kind that will root from a bare stick set deep enough to find the water table. She cut them by the 100. She bundled them and hauled them and stacked them in the shade of the soddy so they would not dry out. 4,000 of them. She set them all in one spring. Alone. There is a way to do it, and a wrong way, and she learned the right way by ruining a few. You dig deep, down to where the ground stays damp. You set the whip at a slight lean, not straight up. You space them so each has room to reach. Depth, angle, spacing, she kept it even. She walked the rows on her knees when her back gave out. And she set them until her hands cracked open and healed over and cracked again. The county watched and made its judgment. A widow, decorating a farm, playing at trees because she had no man to tell her better. At the store they said it kindly enough, which was almost worse. Poor thing. Keeping busy. One evening a wagon came up her track without being asked. Amos Kettle, a widower from 2 miles east, quiet since he'd buried his wife. He did not knock, and he did not speechify. He had a barrel of creek water in the bed, and he drove it row to row and let it run out onto the driest ground, and when the barrel was empty, he touched his hat and left. He said not one word. Hannah watched him go and did not know what to make of it, and in Bloomington, Vane had begun to ask questions. Not loud ones, at first. He leaned on Pryor's counter and asked, easy as weather, how a tree claim got contested. What did a man file if the trees failed? What did the law call it? Failure to cultivate, Pryor told him, and did not like the asking. The rain that should have come in high summer did not come. 18 inches the ground needed. It got a fraction of that. The sky went white and hard, and the wind took what damp was left, and out across Hannah's section half the whips she had set turned gray and brittle and dead. Row on row of them, standing up like little grave markers, plain to every wagon on the road. That was when Vane made his move on the store porch in front of the town. He was a big man, and he used it. He put his boot up on the rail, and he spoke so it carried. You've all seen it, he said. Half dead already, and it's only August. I'll tell you plain. The day a row of hers fails for good, I file. And I'll run cattle on that creek by spring. A woman can't prove up sticks. It's not in her to keep at a thing 8 years. 40 men heard it. Some laughed. Some looked at their boots. Hannah was on the road that day. She heard enough of it. She did not go to the porch. She turned her team and drove out to her own dead rows, and she got down and she walked them. Row after row of gray. The town could see her out there if it cared to look. She did not put her hands to her face. She did not cry. She walked, and she looked, and she counted what was dead, and something turned over in her, standing among those gray sticks. She understood, all at once, that the law did not care what Vane said on a porch. It did not care what the town thought of a widow. The statute cared for one thing only: the count. How many trees stood alive, on how many acres, for how many years? Opinion was nothing to it. A number was everything to it. She had been trying to win the county's good word. She saw now the county's word was worthless paper. The only paper that mattered had her name on it, and Pryor's stamp beneath. So she went home and she opened the gray cloth book, and she stopped using it to keep the rows straight. She began using it to keep herself alive on that ground. She wrote the date. She wrote the row. She wrote how many had died, and how many she pulled, and how many fresh whips she set back in their place. Because that was what keeping the trees meant. Not planting them once. Replanting them, every year the drought or the frost or the rabbits took them, and writing down each time that she had done it. The housekeeping habit became a record. The record became evidence. Word came, too, of a change in the law. An amendment, 78. They had cut the requirement. Not 40 acres of trees anymore. 10 acres, kept 8 years. Hannah rode back to Bloomington and refiled to the lighter standard, the one she could actually prove, and she felt for the first time that the thing might be won on numbers she could reach. Amos came again that autumn. This time, his wagon was full of willow whips, cut long and green from the creek bottom. He unloaded them by her rows without asking where, and this time he did speak. A little. He stood with his hat in his hand, and he looked at the water. My Marin set the first willows down on that creek, he said. Years back, before she took sick. She'd want them spread. He did not say more than that. But it was the most Hannah had heard him say, and she understood he was giving her something that cost him. She took the whips. She said, "Thank you, Amos," and he nodded and went. That winter she made a decision that no one asked her to make, and it was the decision that changed the whole shape of the fight. She rode into Bloomington in the cold, to Pryor's counter, and she laid the gray book down between them. "I want to swear to this," she said, "every year. I want to come in each spring and make an affidavit of what I've cultivated, and I want you to stamp it and enter it on the record. In my own hand. Not at the end. Every year, the whole 8. Pryor looked at her a long moment. "Nobody does that yearly," he said. "The proof comes at the end. I'll not wait to be believed at the end," she said. "I'll build it as I go. Then there's nothing for any man to argue against, but the count itself." Pryor took the pen. He wrote out the first affidavit as she swore it, the rows, the acres, the replants, the dates from the gray book. Then he brought the iron stamp down on it, hard, and the mark bit into the paper. The first one. On the record. In her hand. She did not know yet that Vane was already at the clerk's window down the hall, asking what a contest cost to file, and how soon a hearing could be set. The years after that ran together the way good years do. She set the rows, and she watched them. Some springs the whips took hold and stood green by June. Some springs the frost came late and burned the youngest ones black. Each time a row died, she cut new whips and set them in the same holes. Each time, she wrote it in the gray book. The date. The row. The count. And each spring she rode to Bloomington and swore to it, and Pryor brought the iron stamp down, and another year went onto the record in her own hand. The trees learned the ground. That was how she thought of it. The ones that lived put roots down to the water table and stopped needing her. By the 6th year the rows had begun to read. You could stand 2 miles east on Amos Kettle's Rise and see them, a dark line drawn across her quarter section, where before there had been only grass. 10 acres of trees. Holding, Vane watched them too. She knew that. But he still spoke of them the old way, when he spoke of them at all. Sticks, he called them. A woman's decoration. He had it fixed in his head, and he could not move it, that trees were sentiment. He never once understood what she understood. That the trees were not sentiment, the trees were the price. The United States had named a price for 160 acres, and the price was 10 acres of trees kept alive 8 years, and she was paying it. The 8th spring came hard. There was a note due at the Dry Fork Bank. $240 on the plow team she'd bought to break the sod. It fell due that same season, and she did not have it easy, and everyone in the county knew a woman alone with a note due was a woman who could be pushed. Vane pushed. He filed his contest at the Bloomington land office. Failure to cultivate, the paper said. He had asked how to do it years back, at the clerk's window, and now he'd done it. A hearing was set. 30 days out. 30 days, and the whole 8 years would be decided in a counting room. Amos heard about the contest before she told him. He rode over. He stood in her yard with his hat in his hand, the way he did. "I'll file for you," he said. "I'll swear the affidavits, and the note at the bank, I'll stand security on it. My name's good there. It'd be nothing to me." She looked at him a long moment. She knew what it cost him to offer. She knew what it would cost her to take. "No, Amos," she said. "I thank you." "But no. It's only paper, Hannah. Only a name on a paper. It's the whole thing, she said. If your name goes on that note, or on that affidavit, then when it clears they'll say a man proved it up for her. They'll say it in the store. They'll say it to my face. I'll not have it said a man proved it up for me. This ground came in alone, or it doesn't come in at all. He stepped back. She saw it land on him, hard, the old belief he carried, that he had nothing left in him worth another person's needing. He put his hat on. He rode home. And she stood alone in the yard and let him. The 30 days were the worst of the whole 8 years. One of the witnesses she'd lined up backed out, a man who'd promised to swear he'd seen her rose every season. Vane had gotten to him, some way, and he sent word he couldn't come. The note sat at the bank. And a week before the hearing a late frost came down in the night. The kind that kills. And she went out with lanterns to the youngest replanted rose and could do nothing but watch and pray the water table held them from below. Some she lost. Enough of the old rose stood. But she did not sleep that week, and when she rode into Bloomington she rode in thin and gray and alone, the book on her knee. The counting room was small, a stove in the corner, Pryor behind the long table with the survey maps rolled out. Vane on one side with his attorney, a town lawyer in a good coat, and Hannah on the other with the gray cloth book, worn soft now at the corners, 8 years of stamps inside it. She'd asked 2 people to come. Not to help, to witness. There was a difference, and she held to it. Audie Brandt, the neighbor woman, who'd kept her own counsel and kept her own eyes, and Amos Kettle. She'd ridden to him and said it plain, I don't want your name on the paper, Amos. I want your eyes. Come and say what you saw. He'd come. The attorney went first. He spoke a long while. He said the claimant was a widow of near 40 with no means, that the rows were thin, that the cultivation had failed, that the land ought to revert. He was smooth about it. He never once said her name. Then Pryor said, We'll count. They went out to the section, the whole party, and they counted the rows against the survey. Row by row. Vane's attorney walked it with them, and his face changed as they walked, because the trees were there, not sticks. Cottonwood standing 20 feet, peachleaf willow thick along the low ground. 10 acres of them, measured to the survey line. Back inside, Pryor opened the gray book. He read the affidavits one by one, each year, each replant, each date, and beside each one his own stamp from the day she'd sworn it. 8 of them. 8 consecutive years, entered as she went, in her own hand, matched to the standing count outside. Audie Brandt swore to what she'd seen. Amos Kettle swore to what he'd seen, the rows, year on year, and nothing more, because that was all she'd asked of him. The attorney tried once more. He said a yearly record proved nothing but a woman's habit of writing things down. Pryor closed the docket. He set his hand flat on it. He looked at Vane. Not at the attorney, at Vane himself. A man can be argued with, Mr. Vane, he said. A count cannot. The trees are there, and they are hers. He denied the contest. Vane did not say anything for a moment. He'd come in believing he was outweighting a widow. He learned in that room that he'd been bidding against a statute, and the statute's only price was showing up, and she had showed up 8 years running while he talked. The creek frontage he wanted for his beef, gone. He put on his hat and went out, and he did not look at her. The storekeeper from the Dry Fork porch was in the room. He'd come to watch the widow lose. He went quiet. He stayed quiet a long while. And there was another man there, at the back, that she hadn't expected. Carl's brother. He'd assumed, all these years, that Carl's ground would come round to family in the end. He heard Pryor read the name onto the patent. Not Carl Voss, not the Voss family. Hannah Voss. Her name, on the instrument. He heard it, and he understood there was nothing in it for him, and he left too. Pryor took up the deed. He stamped it, and he did it slow and careful, with something in his face close to respect, and he handed it across the table to her. "In your own name," he said. "In my own hand," she said. She had never been decorating a farm. She'd been buying one, on the only terms in the country that no man could outbid her on, because the price wasn't money, and it wasn't muscle, and it wasn't a name on an old paper. The price was 8 years of keeping 10 acres of trees alive. And she had paid it in full. The grass claims around her had lapsed, one by one, men who filed and gave up. Vane's contest died in that room. Only her deed cleared. The years went on, and the trees went up. There's a still evening, near the end on the section line. The shelter belt stands full-grown now, a dark green wall against the flat gold of the grass, and the very first whip she ever set, cut by her own hand, driven into the ground that first spring while the town laughed, is a cottonwood taller than the soddy. She sits under it. She has the patent with her, framed now, the glass catching the last light. Her name. Her instrument. She met Vane once more, out on the road, years after. He'd sold up by then. He reined in, and he looked at the trees a while, and he didn't have much to say. She gave him one line, dry as August. "You gave it 3 winters," she said. "I gave it 8. And she drove on. Amos took to sitting on her porch of an evening. Nothing was ever declared. That wasn't their way, either of them. But one evening she called him by his first name, just the once, the way you'd hand something across, and he heard it, and that was the whole of it, and it was enough. A belonging earned, never announced. And the willows. His Marin's willows, the ones she first set on the creek before she took sick, the ones Amos hauled to Hannah's rose that autumn and could barely speak of, those ran right up into Hannah's line and blurred into it, so you couldn't say any more where the dead woman's planting ended and the living ones began. The dead had permitted the living. That was Marin's, still standing, in Hannah's ground. The Timber Culture Act was repealed in 1891. Too many claims like Vane wanted to file, too little standing timber to show for them. But hers stood. And if you fly over that stretch of Webster County today, 130 years on, you can still see them from the air, the section-line shelter belts, dark straight rows drawn across the prairie by hands long in the ground. The coldest paperwork on the frontier, disguised as a widow's sentiment. A contract paid in 8 years of showing up. They laughed at a woman planting sticks. Only her deed cleared. If a story like this found you tonight, comment the state or the county you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels.